talking that street talk.
Thank you very much. Although our next guest starred in the big hit Three Men and a Little Lady, to me and millions of other fans around the country, he'll always be remembered as TV's Barnaby Jones. Ladies and gentlemen. He was Magnum.
He wasn't Barnaby
No, he was
Jones.
not Barnaby Jones. He was Magnum.
He was Magnum.
Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the always good-looking Tom Selleck. Tom!
In 2024, he was leading one of television's biggest franchises. 6 months later, the show moved on without him, and no real public explanation ever came. Tom Selleck spent decades as one of America's most trusted stars. Magnum, Jesse Stone, Frank Reagan. A man so steady nobody questioned what was happening behind that calm image. What many still don't know is he lost James Bond before Magnum even happened. He lost Indiana Jones at his peak. He gave 14 years to a franchise that replaced him without a real conversation.
After I did the pilot for Magnum, I tested for Indiana Jones and got the job. Stephen and George, my newest pals at the time, offered me the job, and I said, well, I've done this pilot. And they said, well, thanks for telling us. Most actors wouldn't do that, but we got cards to play with CBS.
Yet he never called that his greatest heartbreak because something deeper had already hit first. Was it his body, his career, or something nobody ever captured on camera? And what is he still carrying at 81, out on 60 acres far from Hollywood? That's what we're here to uncover. Detroit, Michigan, January 29th, 1945. In a country caught between war and hope, Thomas William Selleck was born. Soon his family moved west to California, to Sherman Oaks, where his story quietly began. Post-war California was booming, full of promise and fresh starts. It felt like opportunity was everywhere. Robert Selleck was a serious real estate executive who believed hard work decided everything. Results mattered, and excuses didn't go far in his world. Martha Selleck brought warmth, but she believed in discipline too. Together they raised 4 kids in a home where achievement was expected. Tom stood out early, especially because he was always the tall one. By high school at Grant High, his size and presence caught attention before he even said a word.
Who do you think is the most handsome man in Hollywood?
Me? Oh gosh, there so many come to mind, but I think the first one would be Tom Selleck. Oh, he's charming, he's gracious, he's funny.
In other words, he's a hunk?
He's got a dazzling smile, a great he's a hunk.
I knew you'd see it my way.
He played baseball and basketball, and he wasn't just good, he was driven. His talent came with focus, the kind that made difficult things look easy, and basketball wasn't some passing dream. It was the dream. Tom Selleck wanted to go pro, and he believed it with everything he had. That belief took him to USC on a basketball scholarship, arriving with real confidence and big expectations. But life hit him with its first hard lesson there. He played just 7 games for the USC Trojans. Only 7. It wasn't some dramatic collapse, but it changed something. For a young man chasing one clear future, that was the first shock, the first time reality pushed back, and it wouldn't be the last. In those 7 games, he scored just 4 points. 4 points. For a young man who believed basketball was his future, that hit hard. The brutal truth was simple. College competition exposed the huge gap between standing out in high school and surviving where elite talent is the minimum just to belong. He scored 4 points, and then he stopped playing. What Tom Selleck did next says a lot about who he became. He didn't fall apart. He didn't turn bitter or blame the coaches. When the dream closed, he did something powerful. He looked for the next real path and moved toward it with the same focus he brought to the court. That path was acting.
First of all, we worked a lot more hours than we would have worked on a normal film because they were very concerned about not finishing the film by the time I had to go back to Magnum, who has first call on me. So in that respect, it was difficult. I would say not as difficult as High Road. We didn't have the production problems that we did. We didn't have whole sets blow down from the wind and all. But it has its own set. Every picture has its own set of problems, and we had our share. But that's really part of the process. You know?
And it almost happened by accident. Someone noticed how he carried himself, how he could command a room without trying. There was something in his presence people couldn't ignore. He began studying theater seriously, surprising people who only saw an athlete. But he had something deeper, a natural stillness, a quiet control that made him different. He wasn't forcing performances, he was living inside moments. And when he finally stood in front of a camera, it was like the lens recognized something already there. A presence, a gravity, something real, but talent alone doesn't open doors. Recognition is not opportunity, and that hard lesson he was about to learn again. Opportunity in Hollywood is not the same as success. The years between Tom Selleck's first auditions and real roles were long, uncertain years. He graduated from USC sea and took whatever work came. Commercials, tiny TV roles, the slow grind of building a career before there was even a career to speak of. In the early 1970s, he showed up in small television parts, working steadily with no guarantee any of it would lead anywhere. It wasn't glamorous, but he kept pushing, and during those years, he was doing something else few people talk about. From 1967 to 1973, Tom Selleck served in the California Army National Guard. At 22 during the Vietnam era, that carried serious weight.
Your most recent film, Mr. Baseball.
Yeah.
I saw it not too long ago. You know, I thought that was great. I enjoyed it
I did
quite
too.
well. Now, was there controversy about that? Was somebody upset? Were the Japanese upset? Were the
The
Americans?
Japanese didn't like it so much that I went to bed with my co-star so soon, or maybe at all.
This wasn't background noise. The war shaped everything for young men of his generation. The draft was always there, impossible to ignore. And through it all, he served his 6 years. What stands out is he never turned that service into a headline. He didn't use it to build some public legend or personal myth. He simply served and went back to the hard work of becoming something more. That experience stayed with him, not through speeches, but through the seriousness people later saw in him. A quiet discipline, a steady presence. The kind built long before fame ever arrived. The first marriage came in 1971. Her name was Jackie Ray, and she understood the struggle of chasing a dream in Hollywood. She was there through failed auditions, silent phones, tiny roles, and even smaller paychecks. She stood beside Tom when nothing seemed to be happening. She watched him keep pushing when parts slipped away. When he came home disappointed and went back out the next day, she believed in him before the world had any reason to. Tom later said her faith in those years was everything. Then in 1976, things started shifting. He landed a recurring role on The Young and the Restless. Then more television work followed, small breaks, but real movement at last. Then came a shocking twist. He was nearly James Bond. The producers wanted him, the deal was close, but a prior commitment blocked it. He watched someone else step into that legend and kept moving. Then in 1980, everything changed. CBS called with a new series set in Hawaii, Magnum PI. They wanted Tom Selleck as Thomas Sullivan Magnum, a Vietnam veteran private investigator with charm, swagger, and something television hadn't really seen before. This wasn't just another role, it was the breakthrough, the moment all those hard years had been building toward. And of course he said yes, but what he couldn't know was fame never comes alone. It brings pressure, attention, and forces that can change everything around you, even the things you thought would stay untouched. And once that door opened, nothing in his life would look the same again. The career he spent a decade building was suddenly becoming bigger than he ever imagined, but the marriage that carried him through those silent years was about to face pressure it had never been tested against. Magnum PI premiered in December 1980, and everything changed fast. Tom Selleck learned something shocking. Fame is not a reward. It's a storm. It doesn't just arrive and stay still. It moves through every part of your life, changing relationships, routines, even how people see you. The show wasn't a slow success. It exploded. In one season, Tom went from recognizable to unavoidable. 60 million viewers. The mustache became iconic. The Ferrari became iconic. Even Magnum's laugh became part of television history. Almost overnight, Thomas Sullivan Magnum became one of America's most loved characters. But inside all that attention, something quieter was happening, and Thomas William Selleck was fading behind the image. And then came a painful cost. His marriage to Jackie Ray didn't survive the early years of Magnum fame.
She's my mom.
Thank you, Tom. And the best.
Thanks, Mom.
And congratulations on this.
For all sorts of things. I was an easy
Thank
birth,
you.
wasn't I?
Yes, you were.
Tom has never turned that story into public drama, but over the years he made something clear. The fame came too fast, and the demands were relentless. The man Jackie supported through struggle was suddenly pulled into a world where everyone wanted something from him, and that kind of pressure can change everything. Success had finally arrived, but it came carrying a price he may not have seen coming. They divorced in 1982, and Tom Selleck later described it, without drama, as the worst thing that ever happened to him. Think about that. Worse than the basketball dream ending after 4 points in 7 games. Worse than years of struggle, missed roles, losing James Bond, career setbacks, even the physical pain that came later. Out of everything. He called the end of that marriage the hardest blow. That says everything about who he really was beneath the fame. It shows what mattered most to him was never the spotlight. Not the Ferraris, not the ratings, not the image. It was private life, real connection. The everyday closeness with someone who knew him before the world did. And that loss cut deep, because the divorce took more than a marriage. It also damaged something he rarely talks about, his bond with Kevin, Jackie's son, whom he had helped raise through those struggling years. That relationship had been built in ordinary moments long before fame exploded. And when divorce reshaped everything, that connection couldn't survive the same way. That part didn't make headlines, it wasn't scandal, so people missed it. But losses like that can leave marks deeper than public heartbreak ever shows. And for a man who kept so much private, the fact he called this his worst pain says more than almost anything else ever could. Kevin moved one way, Tom Selleck moved where the show demanded, and the distance between them slowly grew, not through one dramatic break, but through time. Quietly, permanently, and he carried that loss in silence too. Meanwhile, Magnum PI ran 8 seasons and 162 episodes, and Tom brought something rare to Thomas Magnum: warmth, intelligence, and an effortless presence that made the character feel real. He wasn't playing some untouchable hero, he was playing a man. And that's why the show connected. The success poured in. An Emmy in 1984, Golden Globe recognition, magazine covers, endless interviews. But even in the spotlight, there was always something reserved about him, like the public version was only part of the story. Then came another unbelievable twist. Indiana Jones, after losing James Bond, now Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted him for Indiana Jones. By every measure, it was a legendary opportunity, but he couldn't take it. His Magnum contract locked him in. He watched Harrison Ford become Indiana Jones and went back to Hawaii to film another season. And here's what stunned people. He showed no public bitterness, no regret campaign, no complaints. Years later, he explained it simply: a commitment is a commitment. A contract meant something. That says a lot about Tom Selleck. When doors closed, even huge ones, he didn't dwell there. He recognized what was lost, then moved forward with that same quiet certainty that defined everything about him. Loss was real for Tom Selleck, but he never lived stuck in regret. Life kept moving through the choices he made. Then, in 1987, Jill Mack entered his life, a British actress and dancer, and by every account she saw value in him far beyond fame. They married in a ceremony so private the press barely had photos to print, and they've stayed together ever since, nearly 4 decades. In Hollywood, that alone turns heads. Then came another major chapter. Their daughter, Hannah Selleck, was born in 1988. She became an elite equestrian, building her own path with the same quiet discipline her father carried. And when Tom speaks about Hannah, there's real pride there. Then came the ranch. The family moved to Hidden Valley, onto 60 acres once owned by Dean Martin. But this wasn't some flashy celebrity getaway. Tom made it a working ranch, a real place that demanded labor, care, and patience. He planted trees, fixed fences, worked the land with his hands. While Hollywood chased fame, he was out there tending something real. And over time, that ranch became more than a home. It became the truest version of his life. A place untouched by ratings, contracts, or studio decisions. A place where he could be more than the man people saw on screen. For all the fame, this may have been the life he wanted most all along. Through the 1990s, Tom Selleck kept working with the steady confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was. Critics sometimes called his choices limited. Audiences called them dependable. Then in 2005 came Jesse Stone, and it revealed something deeper. Across 8 television films, he played a troubled sheriff carrying loneliness, regret, and quiet pain. And this wasn't Magnum in another form. This was darker, richer, more personal. Jesse Stone felt like grief turned into duty. A man who keeps showing up no matter what. A man who stays standing despite everything. And it's easy to see why Tom connected to that role so strongly. He stayed with those films for nearly 2 decades because they gave him something his action star years rarely demanded: emotional depth. Then came another giant chapter, Blue Bloods. Premiering in 2010, Tom stepped into Frank Reagan, New York's police commissioner and family patriarch, and it felt like a role he had been building toward his whole life. Frank Reagan needed quiet authority, restraint, moral weight, all the things Tom Selleck did better than almost anyone. The show ran 14 seasons and 292 episodes, one of CBS's longest-running dramas. At its peak, he became the most watched actor on network television. And Frank Reagan's Sunday dinners became television tradition. People connected with that old-school strength and seriousness. The character felt like a version of fatherhood many viewers were hungry to see. But even the strongest television empires don't last forever, and another hard turn was coming. And then in 2024, it ended. The cancellation of Blue Bloods wasn't shocking after 14 seasons, but what came next left people stunned. A spin-off was announced. The Blue Bloods world would continue. But Tom Selleck wasn't part of it. He wasn't invited into Boston Blue. The man who anchored the franchise for 14 years, the center of 292 episodes, was left out of the continuation of the world he helped build. And that hit people hard. The network moved forward, and at 80 years old, Tom found himself outside something carrying his fingerprints all over it. Yet publicly, he said little. Of course he did. He said he understood the business, said he had no bitterness, wished the new production well, and maybe all of that was sincere. But pain and grace can exist in the same moment, because beneath the career story, his body was carrying its own battle. Years of action scenes, horseback riding, ranch work, decades of physical wear, it all added up. Arthritis had been building for years, and by the final seasons, the toll was impossible to ignore. Reports described a man working through constant pain, still preparing for every scene with total discipline. That says everything, because even as movement got harder, his standards never slipped. Some moments that once felt effortless now needed help. Not because the will was gone, but because the body had finally started collecting on everything it had been asked to endure. And that may have been one of the hardest fights of all. A stunt double just to step out of a car. That image says a lot. It's sad, yes, but it's also something deeper, because there's something powerful about still showing up when showing up has become costly. That may be the most honest picture of aging there is. Celebrity culture likes icons frozen at their peak, untouched, unchanged. But Tom Selleck didn't freeze in time. He kept showing up. He sat at that Sunday dinner table as Frank Reagan, delivered the lines, held the silences, carried scenes with the same quiet command he always had. Even while his body was fighting its own battle underneath it all. For decades, he played men who never broke, but the body always has its say. He just made sure it had to wait until he was finished. And away from the cameras, there's the ranch in Hidden Valley. 60 acres, morning light over avocado trees he planted himself. And what stands out is this: he still works the land. He repairs fences with his own hands. Not because he has to, because that's who he is. For him, repair isn't symbolic, it's simply what the day asks. And he has always been the kind of man who answers what the day asks. At 81, he moves carefully now. The body carries every mile, every stunt, every demand of 5 decades. Arthritis, wear, damage, all of it is there, but he keeps going. And maybe that says as much about Tom Selleck as any famous role ever did. What once came naturally now takes deliberate effort. And Tom Selleck doesn't complain about that. He never has. He comes from a generation that saw enduring hardship quietly as a kind of dignity. But on the ranch, before interviews and public image, he is simply a man doing the work the land asks of him. And Jill is there. For 39 years she has been there. And in Hollywood, that's more than rare. That's remarkable. She didn't need him to be Magnum to love him, didn't need the awards, the ratings, or the fame. She chose the man behind all of it, the man who wakes before dawn, works the soil, comes home with dirt on his hands, and lives a life that doesn't need performance. That is the marriage that lasted. That is what survived career highs and painful losses. And Hannah is part of that story too. She chose horses, competition, and built success in a world where her father's fame opened no special doors. She earned her place. And the discipline she carries feels unmistakably inherited. When Tom watches her compete, there's a kind of pride beyond words. Because maybe the greatest thing he ever built wasn't on television at all. And even now, new doors may still be opening. There's talk around Jesse Stone, conversations with Taylor Sheridan. A creator who understands older characters can carry enormous weight, and what's striking is Tom doesn't approach any of this like a man chasing relevance. He carries himself like someone still drawn to meaningful work, not attention. And at this stage, that difference means everything. He approaches these new opportunities as a man who still has work left in him, and he seems to believe unused talent is its own kind of loss. I want to work as long as they'll have me. That line hits hard when you hear it the way he means it. Calm, steady, no desperation, not a plea, a declaration. Because for Tom Selleck, the work was always the point. Not fame, not applause, the work, the discipline of stepping into a character fully, honestly, and that's what mattered. And to stop doing that, in his mind, may be the real loss. He isn't afraid of aging, he's afraid of stopping. That's a huge difference, and it separates him from the Hollywood version of aging, built around clinging to image. He didn't fight time like an enemy. He let the mustache turn gray, let his face carry the years, let the body make its quiet compromises without turning it into spectacle. That says a lot, and whatever being left out of Boston Blue cost him, only he fully knows. 14 years at the center of something millions cared about, and then the door closes because the business changed. That's the industry at its coldest, and still, he didn't make that the story. He moved toward what's next. That has always been the pattern. It connects the young man who scored 4 points in 7 games at USC to the man still looking ahead now. Setback hits, he adjusts, and keeps moving. That may be the through line of his whole life. That's what connects the young man who set basketball aside without drama to the man who watched Harrison Ford become Indiana Jones and calmly went back to film Magnum. It connects the divorce he called the worst pain of his life to the marriage that has lasted 39 years. It connects the stunt double on Blue Bloods to new talks about Jesse Stone and what may still come next. There's a through line here, and it isn't stoicism as some performance. It's deeper than that. It's a real way of moving through life, a belief that setbacks aren't the end, that loss is not a verdict, that hardship asks something of you, and you answer it. Because his path was never easy. The basketball dream ended fast. James Bond slipped away. Indiana Jones went to someone else. His first marriage broke under pressure. The franchise he anchored moved on without him, and the body that carried him for decades now makes even simple movement a negotiation. That's a lot. And still, he never made any of it a public grievance. He kept working, kept planting trees, kept repairing fences, kept saying yes when the work mattered. And maybe the biggest thing people missed is what it cost him to keep standing, because he made endurance look so natural. The price became invisible. But that price was real. The cost is always real. And maybe that's what 81 honestly looks like. Not a life without damage, but a life where something stronger outlasted the damage. The ranch, the marriage, the daughter who built her own path, the work still calling his name. That may be Tom Selleck's real legacy. He spent 50 years playing men who never broke. Now you know what it may have cost him. And maybe the bigger story was never the fame, the mustache, or the millions watching. Maybe it was the endurance, getting up before dawn, doing the work, carrying losses without letting them become the whole story. That is something rare. What do you think was harder? Are the losses Tom Selleck faced publicly or the ones he carried alone? Tell me in the comments, because people who keep standing when life says sit down deserve more than admiration. They deserve to be witnessed. He planted trees he may never fully harvest. That isn't sadness, that's faith. And at 81, faith looks like a man still quietly showing up. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who admires resilience. It really helps the channel and lets us keep telling stories like this.